This week on Quadriga, Sochi 2014, the propaganda games. Athletes arriving for the Winter Olympics have their minds mainly on sport, but they may be walking into a storm of political controversy on human rights in Russia and many other issues. There have been questions about the wisdom of hosting winter sports in a region with a subtropical climate. Construction work for the Games also has been criticised. Activists allege corrupt firms have damaged the environment and failed to complete building work on time. Then there are the security fears. Authorities are on the alert for Islamist insurgents. Terror threats have been made against athletes. But President Vladimir Putin says Russia is ready for the Olympics and that economic development in the Black Sea region already means they will be a success. Putin's image certainly needs a boost. He's isolated internationally with his positions on Syria and Ukraine, as well as on civil rights. So is the Olympic ideal still relevant when sports are overshadowed by other issues? Your host this week, Ali Aslan.
Hello and welcome to Quadriga. The final countdown to the 22nd Winter Olympic Games has begun. 88 nations will compete for Olympic gold in Sochi. But aside from the sporting event, many are wondering whether the athletic achievements will be overshadowed perhaps by Russia's domestic and foreign policies. And that is exactly what we want to talk on today's show together with these three guests. Sergei Lagodinsky is a native of Russia and a lawyer by trade. His articles on Russia have been widely published in German newspapers, and he's also a frequent guest and commentator on RTVI, a worldwide Russian-speaking TV network. Wolfgang Mannig is professor of economics at Hamburg University. He won Olympic gold in rowing at the 1988 Games in Seoul and also served as president of the German Rowing Federation. He is a recipient of the Olympic Order, the highest award of the Olympic movement. And Hans-Henning Schröder heads the research group on Eastern Europe and Eurasia at the German Institute for International and Security Affairs. He has written numerous articles and books on Russia and also teaches at the Free University in Berlin on Russian society and politics. Welcome to the show. The final countdown has begun to the Olympic Games, Wolfgang Mannig. And you've been obviously an athlete yourself. You participated at the 1988 Olympic Games in Seoul, an Olympic winner on top. Tell us what's going on through the minds of an athlete so shortly before the Games. This must be one of the, if not the biggest highlight in the life of an athlete, no?
Yeah, it's their prime time, definitely. So they are nervous. It's like if you're having a big examination, the blood pressure is increased, heart stroke rate is increased. They have focused for the last 10, 15 years onto sports and onto that event. So for them, it's the most important thing for a long time.
And Hans-Henning Schröder, the athletes are very excited, as we've just heard. How about the Russians? Because we remember shortly before the Games in London, the Londonites weren't really very enthusiastic about the Games. They were complaining about noise, traffic, too many tourists coming in, congestion, and so on and so forth. What's the mood in Russia on the streets?
Yeah, maybe the people in Sochi are not too enthusiastic about all security things, but on the other hand, the average Russian in Moscow and Petersburg and Kazan somewhere, he's proud to have the Olympics in Russia, no? And they are looking forward to win a lot of medals. No? They are looking forward for the ice hockey team, no? For the figure skating, Plushenko, which is a really great guy, no? And they are proud of all this.
And of course, we will see if the equation of receiving and winning a lot of medals will turn out to be true. Sergei, you are also in touch with Russians. You have friends back in Moscow and the rest of the country. Give us a sense of their moods ahead of these Games.
I think that the overall mood is indeed enthusiastic, and even if you talk to people who are critical of the current Russian government, they are happy about the fact that the games are coming to their country. At the same time, we have now polls which say that about 37% of Russian population believes that the main part and the main purpose of the games was to get commissions, get money to do what they call raspil, which is to get public procurement and share the huge amount of money that they were able to get. So there is this mix of criticism, but also some pride. I think this is the first time for decades that we have a major world event taking place in Russia. So I think we should also understand that for many Russians, regardless of their position on Putin, this is a great event.
Yeah, Wolfgang Manik, as a matter of fact, this is the very first time that Russia is hosting the Winter Olympic Games, and this is the very first time that Russia is able to present itself to an international global audience ever since perhaps the breakdown of the Soviet Union. How big of a deal is this, all these Winter Olympic Games to Russia and for Russia?
Well, I think it's important. It's a symbol of that they're respected throughout the world. The IOC has told them that they have a lot of confidence and trust to the Russian sport family, to the Russian organizations. So indeed, I think it's a good sign for them, and it's important for Russia, yes.
But you have correctly pointed out, Hans-Henning Schröder, that there are some hiccups particularly among the citizens of Sochi, who perhaps are a bit less enthusiastic than the rest of the country, because there have been reports, Sochi's population, by the way, only approximately around 400,000. There have been news of forced resettlements in the region, and many people are also complaining that the many building projects are starting to harm the environment in Sochi. Is that also your understanding?
Yeah, this is really a problem, no? And this all is going on. You hinted on that. No? Already the last 4, 5, 6 years started with eviction of people who lived in the area where the building was going on. There was strange, how to call this, things that people who owned the ground, they lost it to some investors, no, who made really huge money out of it, and there was a lot of criticism. No? And as you said, the mood is ambivalent. On the one hand, people are really proud, no? They are looking forward to this Olympics. On the other hand, the understanding is that the leadership is stealing all the time, no? Stealing from the state, stealing from them, and I think this makes the thing ambivalent. And of course, the ecological problem, no, is, I think this is not very high on the agenda in Russia, in the average, but a lot of people, the intellectuals and the people in the press, know that and write about that.
And Sergei Lagodinsky, the fact that a lot of people are looking forward to the Games is also obviously combined with the fact that a lot of money was spent on these Games. And yet we are hearing stories from foreign reporters arriving in Sochi these days that the hotels, this is a big story, the hotels are not ready yet, and most of the infrastructure is not yet in place. How do you explain that? Or is it much ado about nothing?
Oh, well, some people argue that the Western journalists are oversensitive about that. I think there is a problem with public management here. I think that the government, it was a pride project. This was a project, symbolic project for Putin and for the people on the top, and they wanted to do it no matter what. And there is this sense of if we pour enough money into this, then everything will be fine. Well, this is not how it works. And if you watch the news on Russia, when they talk about politics, when they talk about communication between the president and the government, or the president and the administration down there, it's all about giving orders. And I think there is no sense of how to actually plan, to do urban planning, to do Olympic planning, how to implement these orders. We don't have this culture yet in Russia. So I think this was a mistake on behalf of the people above who said, you know, if only we have enough money poured into this, then everything will function. This is not how things like that, of that scale, work. And we see the results now.
Wolfgang Manek, the news about the hotels that are not ready and the roads that perhaps are not up to par, is this petty complaining on the part of so-called West?
Well, let me start that as far as I know, in no host country of any of the mega events in the last decades, including Germany 2006 and the World Cup, all the infrastructure was complete and finished. Here in Berlin, for example, the underground line, which should have been finished, was not finished.
Still not finished, you could
Still
argue.
not finished, yeah. So we should always be a bit shy to criticize others for their imperfection. I think it's normally. There's a word in sports. If you achieve everything you wanted, you set your targets too low. And in fact, I think here with the hotels, it might be true that some hotels are not ready. But most of the hotels will be ready, I'm quite sure. And I doubt whether there will be any journalist or any visitor who doesn't find a hotel room. So it might well happen that his hotel is not finished or his room is not finished, but he will be able to find a good room.
And since you were an athlete, let me talk about the conditions for the athletes just a little bit, because the venue, Sochi, was also criticized, or at least wondered about. Many are saying, the Sochi, it's a subtropical climate, not ideal for winter games. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think we have to differentiate. Sochi itself is a warm region, but it doesn't matter for the ice competitions, which are all in covered arenas. What is important is that you have enough snow in the mountains, but as far as I know, there is enough snow because it's much higher than Sochi. So what I've heard from my athletes friends is that they find very, very good conditions and that they're very happy about the competition sites and about the Olympic Village. And to be honest, I didn't expect anything else because, and I would like to add to what you said, if the Russians have one tradition, that's the tradition of planning. They had that for 70 years, planning. In a different way, of course, but I think they have more a planning tradition, let's say, than the Swiss, the Germans, or even the Americans.
There's a difference between planning and planning with a certain purpose, which will be a target which will be met. And I think this is the difference. Even during the 70 years, there was a lot of planning, but there was not much delivering. And planning to deliver is the problem that we have in Russia.
They changed the target every year in the 5-year plan. No?
And it's also planning now in the market economy is different than planning something in a communist situation.
Well, we can still, I suppose, anticipate that the sporting venues will be up to par and that we can look forward to some interesting games. Hans-Henning Schröder, there are people who are saying President Putin wants to seize these games for propaganda. He wants to present a so-called new Russia. The question I would ask, to play devil's advocate, is it legitimate? Every country, every city wants to present itself with the games, whether it's a World Cup or the Olympic Games.
I don't think that he will show a new Russia. He will show an old, traditional, conservative Russia who is working well. No? Because new Russia, if you think about what is now telling us about traditional values and so on, new is not the word of the hour in the moment. No? But this is exactly, I think, why not only he, but the whole leadership wants to have these events. No? We are the championship in 2018. They have the G2 and G8 and G20 summit. No? And this is, of course, to show this country works. The people and the important people come to our events, talk to us, and we are really, again, an important power in the world. No?
And Sergei, certainly President Putin did his part in making sure that the PR gets flowing in favor of Russia by releasing Mikhail Khodorkovsky and Pussy Riot ahead of the games. Do you think that was a shrewd tactical move on his part?
I think it was a miscalculation. If this was the purpose, to improve the reputation of the country, I think by doing that he instead put focus on the situation in Russia. I think that I'm not sure in how much this whole reputational plan really worked. I think that if you have an event of that scale, everyone looks at you through the prism and through the lens, which makes things larger, and zooming on everything which is going on in the country. And if things are not okay in the country, then the risk is that people are going to talk about this really, really loudly. And this is what what we see happening now. And releasing a couple of prisoners, even prisoners who are of such an emblematic meaning and role, I don't think this really helped. This just pointed out that things, how they run in the country, are done by the will and decision of one single person. And this is what we saw also in the course of these releases.
And of course, Wolfgang Manek, as with any big sporting event these days, not just with these games, we have to talk about security and safety. And perhaps we have to talk about security and safety a little bit more in this particular case, because Sochi is only a few hundred miles away from the Dagestan and Chechnya regions where immense fighting are taking place. 40,000 police officers and troops are on hand to ensure that the safety is being guaranteed. Is this just a side product these days that one has to live with when you stage such an enormous game?
It's a very sad subject, but remind that it all started in Munich, '72. Since then we had other problems with security. For example, in Atlanta, '96, there was a bomb on the Olympic Plaza. So this, and I think it's a very, very bad thing, terrorism, may happen everywhere and is of course also a risk to Russia, but not only to Russia. I am nevertheless optimistic that the athletes, that Sochi will be a secure area. Where I have my questions is that whether outside of Sochi, terrorists will not take advantage of the publicity and produce attacks. This might be a problem. But within Sochi, I think that the security will be very good.
But Hans-Henning Schröder, nonetheless, the tension, if you will, is somewhat high, because Doku Umarov, for instance, the Islamist leader, has already called upon his followers to do everything in their power to disrupt these games. And we've seen the suicide bombings in Volgograd in December, where more than 30 people were killed.
There were 3. We forgot one here. And now you have to understand, there's since 15 years, there's a civil war going on. Low intensity, but nevertheless, you have everyday shootings, you have everyday bombings, you have everyday deaths or wounded there. We don't cover this here in the German media, but there's really a civil war going on. The center is in the moment more in Dagestan. That's about 800 kilometers, also 600 miles from Sochi. But it's also going in Kabardino-Balkaria and other of these republics. No? Chechnya, Ramzan Kadyrov subdued the insurgents there, so it's a relative quiet there. And Ramzan Kadyrov, who is the president of Chechnya, or the head of this region, he told us that his man has killed Doku Umarov. We have no evidence of that, no? But he's telling us that. On the other hand, you have mentioned this, in December we had 3 bombings, 2 in Volgograd, a 3rd one in Pyatigorsk. And we have, of course, in Russia proper, as in Moscow and other points, we have a history of bombings, Domodedovo, Moscow Metro, and so on. So there's a big risk. No? I agree with you. I suppose security in Sochi is so tight that the insurgent won't be able to make, I hope so at least, no? But the risk that there will be something on the общественный transport, on the public transport, thank you, on the public transport, somewhere 100 kilometers away from Sochi, that the risk, you can't deny that.
So let's certainly hope that these games will be safe. And the Americans have already warned of attacks via plane on Russia. But Sergei Lagodinsky, these games come at a backdrop of two major international conflicts where Russia obviously plays a major role. One is Syria, the other now is the Ukraine. A lot of people are criticizing Russia's involvement, particularly in Syria, and have been for the past 2.5 years. Do you think these two conflicts will play any role during during the games?
I don't think that the conflicts will play much role, but during the games will play a role for the conflicts, especially for the conflicts in the Ukraine. I think that the opposition in the Ukraine has a window of opportunity which will be closing very soon. And I think that as soon as the Olympic Games are over, then the world is not going to be focused as much on Russia and the decision of the Russian government. And I think that there we will be seeing probably a shift in the stringent and the fast-forward and straightforward position of the government vis-à-vis Ukrainian opposition. We already heard yesterday that the people in Crimea, in the little territory near the Black Sea, which is mostly populated by Russian-speaking population, are starting collecting signatures for some solution which would bring them closer to Russia. And I'm afraid that we might face a development pointing to the development that we had in Georgia. But during the Olympic Games, I don't think that Russia can afford doing anything which would anger the world community and the public press. So we will have to wait.
Wolfgang Manek, for an athlete, how much of this all, the Syrian conflict, the conflict in the Ukraine, corruption, environmental issues, how much do these issues play a role for the athletes, if any?
I don't think that it plays a big role, but it's very natural. If you are acting on such a high level, never mind whether it's in music, arts, sports, science, academics, wherever. If you are so much focused, there's not much room for anything else. And especially some very few days before the target competition of your life, you don't think about other things.
But of course, politics and sports are two elements, if you will, that are hardly separable these days, especially if you stage such a huge event such as the Olympic Games. Then it's one of the biggest platforms that one can have to voice their discontent and their political views. Let's have a quick look of how this all plays out.
Big sporting events these days are rarely just about sport. Instead, they have become a focus for public protest, much of it only indirectly related to the competitions. The 2012 London Olympics sparked demonstrations for everything from an end to the British government's spending cuts to a ban on corporate sponsorship of the Games. Munich's bid to host the 2018 Winter Olympics faced opposition over concerns about the environment and about financial risks. In the end, the No Olympia campaign won the day. The 2022 Soccer World Cup in Qatar has attracted criticism over the process that awarded the event to the Gulf state and over the treatment of migrant construction workers. And there have been repeated angry demonstrations ahead of this year's World Cup in Brazil, which many see as channeling money away from poor communities. Scenes like this show how difficult it is to keep sport and politics apart.
Well, Wolfgang Manek, the combination between politics and sports is not a new one, obviously. During the Cold War, many athletes on either side, the Soviet Union or the American side, boycotted one another. Is this just a phenomenon that is a given these days, no matter what country is hosting these events?
Yes, I think so. We have to admit that each country which is organizing such a mega event, among other things, wants to increase in its image and want to have a better perception in the world. That's natural. Nevertheless, let me stress that the sporting family does not accept that it will be misused for political things. So the mega events like the World Cup or the Olympic Games still are in the first line a sporting event and nothing else. And we have to make sure that the competitions are fair, that the best athletes win their medals, and everything else is really in second line. But and let me add that boycotts, because you mentioned the boycotts, that's a real harm to the Olympic family. I personally know some athletes who trained for a decade and who were not allowed to go to Moscow in 1980, and still today, 30 years later, they still feel like hurted. You know, they have missed one of the most important things in their life.
And since you mentioned the word boycott, Sergei Lagodinsky, the one person who was one of the first major political figures to boycott the games in Sochi was, of course, German President Joachim Gauck. He made it very clear that he does not intend to attend the games back in Sochi. Is this something that you condone? Is this something that you embrace, or would you say these kind of boycotts are rather naive and ineffective?
I think in some cases we should watch closely whether something is a boycott or not. In the situation, in the case of Angela Merkel, for example, where people say she's boycotting, she didn't go to the previous Olympic Games either. So it was just a decision not to join these Olympic Games, just as she didn't join them before. In case of Gauck, I think it's a different matter. I think that he has a personal biographical access to the situation in Russia. He has a personal biographical view on the president of Russia, who himself was a KGB person stationed in Eastern Germany. And I think this was a conscious decision also to make it public in a way that it was made. And I think that he has a right to do so and to make this decision. This is not a personal decision. This is a decision by the head of our state. So this is a political decision. And yet I think that in a situation like that, you know, you said Olympic idea and politics should be separated. Olympic idea is an idea about peace, an idea about equality and human rights. And if we talk about values and we see that values are not implemented, as some people would say, in the country hosting Olympics, then you cannot keep politics out of it.
Yeah, nevertheless, I think for the German athletes, it's a pity that he decided against it, and he should think about it. His visit would, in my view, would have been a contribution to the success and feel good of the German athletes, not to Putin.
Absolutely. It's a personal tragedy, just as it is a personal tragedy that we still have, for example, 12 people who are facing jail sentences of 5 to 6 years for just demonstrating against Putin. I mean, this world and this politics is full of personal tragedies, and the question is what side of the history you want to put yourself on.
Well, the first thing, you said rightly that Gauck don't boycott. He simply don't go there. No? And the question is, should he go there? It's anti-Russian or it's anti-Putin. The one thing is, I think, I say that to get photographed together with Putin is a problem for a democratic politician nowadays. No? Exactly what you said about this demonstration on Bolotnaya, and the process is still going on, and some other developments there. On the other hand, if you remember, on the 27th of January, we had here in the Bundestag, we had Mitigranin, no? Who spoke about the Leningrad blockade, and Gauck was there together with Morgan. This was, of course, a demonstration that we are interested in Russia and to have good relations to Russia, and that we remember what we did in the Soviet Union back in the Second World War, and maybe Gauck has a personal history, but he feels that he has to do something, and then he'll go to Russia if there's a context, but not in this context.
But of course, President Gauck, German President Gauck, is not the only prominent political figure to have spoken out. Ban Ki-moon, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, has just urged President Putin and the Russian government to respect the rights of gay people, for instance, during and obviously also after the games. Tell us from your point of view, what is being left at the end of the day if these political figures, if these political issues take over? What is being left at the end of the day of the games themselves?
Well, we are one day before the opening, yeah, and as usual, as has been true in all mega events in the last decades, until the Olympic flame is not lighted, criticism has a lot of place. But once it is lighted, everything is forgotten. And be sure, after tomorrow, no one will discuss political issues anymore in Russia connected with the Olympics. So indeed, I think it's a question of the time period to which you refer. And during the Olympics, at least, the medal counting is more important than anything else. Afterwards, okay, there is some impact, but again, I think it's a positive thing for the Olympic Games because in many cases, the Olympic Games more or less forced the political leaders of the countries to change certain things. Maybe not in all cases to the extent which some people in the world would like to have a change in the host country, but at least they know that they were very much regarded and very much hit by the criticism, and so they changed it. And the same is true in Russia. President Putin set free some prisoned persons, for example, right in front of the Olympic Games. He made clear that you could demonstrate in Sochi, in the narrow of Sochi. He made clear that homosexuals do have a right to speak out in Russia, for example.
Unless they touch children.
Unless they touch children, but of course, let me say as a father, I don't want anyone to touch my children.
Well, anyone is different than saying that homosexuals should not touch your children. So,
well, I think the point is that the anti-gay law runs a bit counter to what the IOC has set out for itself, hasn't it? The IOC charter states precisely that no discrimination ought to be applied on anyone, regardless of race, creed, or sexual orientation. So this move on the part of Russia and the Russian parliament to sign this anti-gay law, it doesn't run counter to the very idea of hosting such a game?
Well, definitely it was not very wise, I would say, from Russian politics to have that decision in front of the Olympic Games. But please be aware that in 70 countries, as IOC President Thomas Bach also stressed, that in 70 countries all over the world you have laws against homosexuals. So it's not only Russia. Of course, you may criticize Russia for it, for sure. But you be aware that it's not only Russia. We have also to concentrate to other nations. And again, the Olympic Games in this case show that because Russia is having the Olympic Games, now Russia and the homosexual laws in Russia are in the international attention, not in other nations.
Yeah, but to be clear, homosexuality is not forbidden in Russia. What we have is a law which forbids the propaganda around children of homosexuality, and this had consequences because we have in the Russian a majority who is homophobe still up to now. It's I think on the level we had in France or Germany in the 80s, and we changed our values and we developed. Russia is still not developed in this sense, and one of the problems of the Putin regime is that he tries to keep those old values on the spot, and he tries to this is of course a question of domestic policy. He tries to get the support of all these homophobe people for his regime. So I don't know if Putin personally is homophobe or not, but he uses this as an instrument to get political support. And in this case, it's with the Olympics. He has a problem with that.
And U.S. President Barack Obama may have perhaps given the best answer by including gay athletes in the U.S. delegation.
There's also domestic politics, American.
I suppose it's all politics at the end of the day. But, of course, the anti-gay law is not the only human rights issue that is plaguing Russia, at least when it comes to international perception. Another one, of course, is the limitations on freedom of speech and the media. Now, you are a frequent contributor to the Russian media. You also moderate on Russian TV. Give us your sense. Do you think that these games will perhaps have a positive effect, that it will lead to more and not less liberalization? Because the focus is so much on Sochi these days and on Russia.
Well, the signs are, as we see them now, is that the situation is going to be exactly the reversed one. And if you see, I usually don't come to TV recordings like that, but out of solidarity with a very good and independent channel of young people who organize themselves and who are, yes, they are critical of the Russian government, but they are great. The TV Rain, Telekompania Dozhd, I solidarize with them. Everything was done weeks before the opening of the Olympic Games to stifle this voice, this independent voice in the media landscape in Russia. Cable providers, satellite providers, all at once in an orchestrated mode decided to kick them out of their of the offers for the population, and millions of people are not able to see what this only one, the last remaining independent voice, TV voice has. It's online now and doing it through the internet. They're not going to give up. But I think that the international community should watch closely what is going to happen to this channel, because for me it's a sign of how the last piece of free media reporting is going to be stifled or is going to survive in Russia.
So we'll keep an eye out on that. And 200 acclaimed authors, worldwide famous authors such as Günter Grass, Salman Rushdie and Jonathan Franzen just published a unified response to Vladimir Putin today in today's Guardian. Is this something that, perhaps my question goes to you both as experts on Russian society, are these appeals falling on deaf ears in Russia? Is this something that is even being reported on or noted? Hans-Henning Schröder?
I suppose it will be reported. I've this morning still not seen the Russian news, but I think what the context for Russia is not exactly the 200 authors. The context is what they call the orange panic, no? Also the developments within the Ukraine and the fear that something similar could develop within Russia, because you have to understand that the Putin administration is on a fragile base in the moment. No? After the winter 2011-12, it was clear there's a lot of criticism within society, not only in the big towns, although in the countryside this is more on the social level, not about democracy, but there's a lot of criticism of the regime, and Putin tries since May 2012 everything to get more support in society. And what he does is mobilizing on the right side of society all the time. Homophobic, xenophobic, against migrants, all these things. What is rightly criticized by these authors. No? But this is a domestic issue. He looks for domestic support. No? And Ukraine he perceives as a danger for Russia. No? And so this is the context, I suppose.
Wolfgang Manek, you've said that almost all sporting events, almost all Olympic Games have been preceded by widespread criticism, by complaints. But once that Olympic torch is being lit, everything is being forgotten and enthusiasm for the Games take over. Do you suspect that it will be the same in Sochi?
It will be the same. And even ex post after the Games, you will not hear very much of criticism. Think about, let's say, for example, South Africa World Cup. How much criticism has there been? It's the day of the beginning of the match. Everything was forgotten. And now, some 3-4 years afterwards, did you ever hear any criticism, any analytics on the effects of the World Cup on South Africa?
Does it still pay? Does it still pay for a country? And I don't mean purely in financial terms. Does it still pay for a country to apply to be a host?
Well, as an academic economist, I must answer: it depends. It depends how you do it. You know, how you organize it, how you fit the Olympic Games or the World Cups into your urban fabric, how you plan the stadiums, how you involve the social communities, how you finance it, how you market it, etc., etc. But I think the frame for organizing the games or the World Cups are that good as they have never been, financially, from the public view, etc. So I think you have every chance to make a good thing out of the mega events for your country.
Well, the citizens of Munich certainly would disagree. They opposed the Olympic bid for Munich to host the Olympic Winter Games in 2022. Your take, Hans-Henning Schröder, since we're slowly running out of time, what do you expect of these games, aside from obviously great athletic achievements? What do you expect? Do you think any of these political issues and ramifications that we've talked on today's show will linger once the games start?
No, I agree fully with you. I think when the games start, we will have a good show, no? And we have followed the competitions. And you are also right. After the games, the focus is not anymore on Russia. No? So you can, in the moment, you can use the situation to discuss Russian politics. In the time of the Olympics, we will talk about the Olympics, and after that, well, some experts
Brazil.
and people.
It will be Brazil.
Brazil will be the new focus. No?
Of course, Brazil will be hosting the World Cup this summer. Sergei Lagodinsky, do you think that we're focusing only, not we here on this panel obviously, but the media is focusing only on the negative, or would you rather say that the Olympics will help shed light on the domestic political front in Russia?
We'll see how the coverage is going to take place during the next couple of weeks, and I do hope that this coverage is going to improve and it's going to be positive, and I hope that the media is going to find the positive sides besides talking about medals. I do think that it helped Russia. I think that everything, even a critical view, but everything talking about Russian people. And Russian people are not just those in power. Russian people are those who are in jail. And Russian people are those who want to dance in the church and get for 2 years in prison. This is all for Russian people, and I think this benefited Russia.
Well, we will see who will benefit eventually from these games, whether it's Russia, the athletes, or perhaps the international community as a whole. One thing's for sure, the final countdown has begun. Very much looking forward to the games. Thank you for an outstanding panel, for a great discussion on the upcoming events in Sochi. I want to thank you also out there for tuning in, and looking forward to seeing you again next week for a new discussion on Quadriga.